Good evening. This is Mayor Rich Landsberg. It is 6:03 p.m. and I would like to make clear for the record of this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes of this meeting, that this special city council meeting of March 31, 2020, the Woodland City Council will be conducted pursuant to Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-29-20. This meeting will be held via teleconference, and council members will participate via teleconference. Their locations are not listed on the agenda and are not accessible to the public. However, the public is encouraged to listen to the city council meeting live on Woodland TV channel 20, and also by going to the City of Woodland website at www.cityofwoodland.org/meetings. If any member of the public wishes to make a comment during the general public comment on a specific agenda item, there are two ways to do that. First, members of the public were invited to leave a voicemail message at 530-661-5900. All voicemail messages received by 6 p.m. today will be played during the city council meeting and read into the record at the appropriate time. Any member of the public watching the live stream who wishes to make a comment on an item as it is being heard may submit an email to the city clerk at councilmeetings@cityofwoodland.org prior to the public comment on that item. Email comments submitted to be read into the record shall be no more than 3 minutes long when read aloud. Please include the agenda item on your subject line. At this time, Madam Clerk, would it be appropriate for you to conduct roll call? Each member, please identify yourselves during roll call.
Thank you, Mayor Landsberg. I will now take roll call in alphabetical order. Councilmember Barajas.
Here.
Councilmember Fernandez.
Present.
Mayor Landsberg.
Present.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Stallard.
Stallard, present.
Thank you. I would now like to request that each member of the council respond to these questions. Mayor Pro Tem Stallard, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Councilmember Barajas, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Councilmember Fernandez, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Does each member of the council have a copy of the agenda for this meeting?
Mayor Landsberg.
Oh, yes, Mayor Landsberg, can you hear me well?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of the agenda?
Yes.
Councilmember Barajas, copy of the agenda?
Yes.
Councilmember Fernandez, copy of the agenda?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez, copy of the agenda?
Yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem Stallard, a copy of the agenda?
Stallard, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Have you posted the agenda at a location reasonably accessible to members of the public?
Yes.
Thank you. The record then should reflect that all council members are present for this teleconference and have indicated that they were able to hear the proceedings. At this time, I am requesting other city officials who are present to introduce themselves and their position so that the record can reflect their attendance.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Acting City Manager Ken Hyatt is present.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is Kara Uweta, City Attorney.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This is Ana Gonzalez, City Clerk.
And then, Mayor, I will read off the remaining staff members on the call. We have Chief Derek Caff, Fire Chief Eric Zane, Emily Walling, Fire Marshal, Christine Engel, Community Services Director, Craig Locke, Public Works Director, Brent Meyer, Acting CDD Director, Kim McKinney, Finance Officer, Scott Sallin, IT Manager, and Dan Sokolow, Senior Planner.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Now, as we go through this agenda, I would request that before speaking, please identify yourself before you speak. For example, this is Council Member Barajas, etc. Let the individual speak. Please do not interrupt that speaker. I would also ask, to the greatest extent possible, everyone mute their phones so that we don't get unnecessary background noise. I would now like to advise all council members and the city clerk, any votes taken during this teleconference portion of this meeting must be taken by roll call. I would ask Madam Clerk to take that roll call for any and all votes. Now we'll begin with the agenda, starting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask Councilmember Barajas to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Salute, pledge. I pledge
Pledge allegiance
to
Of the United
to the
States of
flag
America,
and
of
to
the
the
Republic,
for
which
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
and justice
and
for all.
justice.
for all. Thank you, Councilmember Barajas. We're now going to item D, public comment. Madam Clerk, as the council chambers are closed to public, is there any member of the public who has submitted an email or left you a voicemail for the general public comment portion of this meeting?
Yes, I have 2 voicemails that I will play. Hold on just a minute. Here's the first voicemail message. And it's very hard to hear. We had a hard time deciphering the message ourselves, but I needed to play it because it came in as a public comment.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
And then I have one more. Yeah, I'm sorry, that wasn't audible either.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any other recordings you need to try to play?
No,
Are there any emails you need to read?
no.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're now going to move to item E. That is council comments, communications. I'm going to start with Council Member Mayor Pro Tem Stallard.
Thank you, Mayor Landsberg. This is my 6th public meeting by teleconference, and I'm grateful to those who work with the technology to make these meetings possible. Today, the Greater Sacramento Economic Council met. We had 83 people on a Zoom conference. And we learned of a business in the Sacramento region called STEM Express, which has developed a testing method for the COVID virus. And they can turn out results for like 350 people in 15 minutes. So the testing the testing protocols are going to improve rapidly going forward. It's nice also to have a growing business like this in our region. We also heard from Dr. Richard Thornburg, an economist, who predicted that this situation would pass almost as quickly as it came. He said that even though the first quarter of this year will be much down and the second quarter even more, that he predicts a resurgence by the third quarter, and that by the end of the year, perhaps the economy will be close to where it was at the beginning of the year. So that was welcome news. We also, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments held its meeting. The Policy and Innovation Committee, on which I sit, has approved a budget of $26 million for SACOG for next year. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stallard. I will call upon Council Member Barajas.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Landsberg. Good evening, everybody. My report, it's pretty much short. I did jump on a Board of Supervisors call earlier today. They had a Board of Supervisors meeting. And interestingly enough, they're actually providing great service to our community in Yolo County regarding unemployment insurance and job seekers and local business. The county's going to be open for the public to receive information via phone call to their offices from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Beginning April 1st, which is tomorrow. Their phone number is 530-661-2641, 530-661-2641. They are going to provide information, like I said, for those that are seeking unemployment insurance or looking for a job, or also loan opportunities for small local businesses, which I think is very important. We have tons of small businesses here in Woodland and around the area. And they're going to provide information regarding economic injury disaster loan, the emergency EIDL grant, the Paycheck Protection Program loan. And also there is a hotline for agricultural workers who are looking to receive health insurance or also safety protection, such as N95 masks. I saw that on the front page of the Daily Democrat today, which a lot of our agricultural workers in the state of California and also in Yolo County are exposed or could be potentially exposed to coronavirus. And so we're looking to protect them and educate them. And there's thousands of them that live in Woodland. So again, our partners at the county are doing a terrific job, staff, Board of Supervisors, administration, and because there's crossover between the county and the city, I just urge our residents to participate if they need those services because they're out there for them. And so I'll connect with our city manager, Ken Hyatt, so maybe we can connect some of those links from the county over to the city website and we can promote that. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Barajas. Now we'll call upon Councilmember Enrique Fernandez.
Thank you, Mayor Landsberg. I've got nothing to report at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Fernandez. Now, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to take this moment to thank Dignity Health for their proactive approach in setting up and being prepared for any potential COVID-19 cases in the near future. I also want to thank the food bank, who I know has been active out there in the community in delivering food to our folks. And just to continue the message to our community to be patient, to stay indoors as much as possible. And when they're out shopping, if they make the effort to use those masks and those gloves and those sanitary wipes, which will keep them safe. That is all on my end, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez. This is Mayor Landsberg. I have a very brief comment, and it's this. We cannot let this day go by without mentioning that today is a holiday. It is Cesar Chavez Day. But because of the precautions taken regarding the COVID-19 outbreak, our celebration that was scheduled to celebrate Cesar Chavez Day has been canceled. We had a great program lined up. We still need to remember the sacrifices that Cesar Chavez made on behalf of farm workers and, in fact, all workers in California and throughout the United States. But today, this takes on even more meaningful meaning as we thank first responders, medical personnel, and those essential employees, such as truck drivers and store clerks and others who are under so much demand during this critical time in our history. But I really especially want to recognize farm workers who continue to toil in our fields, our vineyards, our orchards, who work with very little protection from COVID-19. Let's recognize their contribution to this effort to keep us healthy and well fed. And that is my comment for tonight. I'm now going to turn over to City Manager Ken Hyatt.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Most of my updates will be covered under the COVID-19. As you can imagine, majority of our time right now is focused on that. I do want to add to the mayor's remarks and acknowledgments about the importance of today. And while we were not able to gather in celebration today, we were still able to honor the birth and accomplishments of Cesar Chavez through the youth essay contest. 3 students have been selected from Woodland High School for first, second, and third place for their essays, and we will be inviting them to come to a future council meeting to read their essays and share how Cesar Chavez influenced their lives. So look forward to that. I do want to quickly go over the long-range calendar, which our next regular scheduled meeting is April 7th, the next Tuesday. It is scheduled to be another teleconference meeting. For request of the council, we have removed any public hearing items, however, from that meeting due to the teleconference status, and we'll be pushing those hearings out to April 21st. And then we had also planned to have a spring budget workshop on the 7th. We will also be moving that to the 21st of April. And hopefully by that time, if we are still under a shelter-in-place order, we'll be in a position to have video conferencing available for the council meetings to provide better public comment opportunity for those important items. So council has any questions on the long range, let me know. Otherwise, take a look at the agenda packet. It's got a pretty thorough list of consent calendar items for next week that we'll go over. And then, of course, we'll have a continuing update on COVID on every council meeting. That concludes my update, Mr. Mayor. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, City Manager. Does any member of the council have a question for the City Manager regarding the calendar? Hearing none, we're going to move to item F2, which is the City Manager's update on the COVID-19 response.
All right, so as part of our ongoing effort to keep both the council and the community apprised of efforts going on within our local community, and the measures we're taking to both mitigate impacts that we're starting to see from the emergency, but also as important, right, prepare for what may be ahead of us. You know, rest assured, we continue across staff to monitor what's happening around the world, as well as within our own country, our state, and here in our county, using that information to refine our plans and strategies to help our community be in a position to respond to these current issues, but also prepare for potential impacts should the spread of the virus follow trends that we've witnessed in other parts of the world and even in our own state. We are fortunate, I believe, to have the benefit of learning from the unfortunate circumstances in other cities and countries around the world, but we are using that intelligence to inform our strategies and plans moving forward. We remain to have the Emergency Operations Center for the City of Woodland active at the moment. I'm going to have Emily Walling, our Fire Marshal, and also our coordinator of our EOC share some updates from within that group for the council. But before I turn it over to Emily, I want to touch on some organizational highlights for us. At the meeting last week, the council asked for what the status was of our own staffing levels at the time. I reported back out to the council that we do have currently 290 full-time employees that are actively engaged with the city, of which 217 are currently at work on a daily basis, either here in their normal function at workplace or also as telecommuter works in their shelter-in-place orders. So we still have a substantial amount of our workforce actively engaged in day-to-day activities, albeit much of that honestly focused on responding and preparing for issues around COVID. There is still a fair amount of work, especially as we start to see a bit of a lull right now, getting back to some of the tasks at hand and actually even catching up on some of the work that has been set aside. So we're confident that we're doing what we can with the situation. Happy to also report, as of today, we do not have any confirmed city employees that have been diagnosed with COVID. We will continue to make every effort to protect our staff, particularly the frontline staff and our first responders, both police and fire. Have seen increase in calls for service over the last several weeks, putting them potentially in opportunities for exposure. But I am confident that both Chief Shane and Chief Caff and their staff are implementing best practices to ensure that their staff are taking the appropriate precautionary measures to protect themselves. As we know, it's critical for those frontline staff to maintain their health and our ability to respond to our community's needs should the situation continue to worsen. On a positive note, last week, you might have noted in the CM Weekly that we did graduate 4 fire cadets from the academy. We are now, during this week, onboarding those cadets into the fire departments. And as early as next week, we'll be assisting our fire staffing requirements, which is going to be critical, especially for us if calls for service continue to trend upwards. And if we're in a situation where we start to lose any of our staffing, having that additional resource will be key. I do want to point out that we did learn that our colleagues from Davis, that 2 of their firefighters were diagnosed with COVID due to exposure. Pleased to report that both of those firefighters are recovering and are expected to be back at work in a couple of days. We also heard that AMR had 2 of their employees confirmed to be diagnosed with COVID-19, and I expect them to fully recover as well. But as you can see, these frontline personnel are potentially at risk of exposure, and we will continue to do what we can to protect our staff. From a utilities operations standpoint, we continue to be in a very good position there to deliver both sewer, water, and storm drain services. The staff are doing an excellent job to maintain those resources, so there's no concern or risk that those critical infrastructure pieces will be compromised. Our economic development staff have been extremely busy the last 2 weeks trying to respond to business inquiries across the community and build better communication resources, as well as channels through the Chamber of Commerce and our own office, but also regionally. We've continued to build the resource on our webpage, and as Councilmember Barajas mentioned, we will ensure that the links to the county resources are added as well. We've also been reaching out just one-on-one with key business owners throughout the community at all sectors, and gaining valuable insight from them as to what their current conditions and issues are, and really where their biggest needs are to be able to support them. So we're using that intelligence to continue to refine our strategies around business support and resources, constantly digesting the resource and relief packages coming out of the federal government as well as state of California, and understanding how those could support the businesses here in our own community. Code enforcement, as many of you might know as well, has been extremely active, responding to both citizen inquiries about businesses that they're concerned are operating outside of the county health officer's order. And we're doing an excellent job, first starting with education approach and then ramping up as needed enforcement if that is needed. But again, pleased to report that the majority, if not all of the contacts we have made has resulted in compliance ultimately with the health order. So we will continue to do our diligence there to respond to those complaints and even proactively contact businesses that we feel may be operating against the order. And then I'll conclude with, on our weekly call with the county administrator and the city managers in Yolo County, a lot to talk about, but I'll just touch on two key topics that came out of that conversation. And one was a report that the county health officer will be establishing a regular briefing for electeds that will be pushed out, I believe, if not every other day, potentially even every day as needed. We anticipate that that briefing will include a dashboard ultimately that the county health department is putting together that will record the cases that are confirmed here within Yolo County, broken down by city, and ultimately having that dashboard provide a comparison, I believe, to where Yolo County and our communities are relative to the state, the country, and even nationally. And then secondly, the Yolo Community Benefit Fund is a concept and a proposal even that has been put forth that has been vetted through the County Board of Supervisors. We talked a bit with the city managers and the CAO about the intention and the purpose of this fund. And in summary, it's an effort to help funnel prospective donation dollars into a single point of receipt. And really, these are intended to be the larger potential donors that are looking to support relief efforts here in our county and our communities, and not intended to divert dollars that would otherwise go to nonprofit organizations. A press release, I believe, is going to be forthcoming, but essentially the fund will be a comprehensive effort to scan the needs of all of our respective communities throughout Yolo County, and then be that point of donation for these larger gifts. And through criteria that will be developed through this fund, the participants in the fund, of which each of the counties, cities, representatives, as well as the county and nonprofit organizations would be represented, would go through criteria and screening process and make decisions on how those dollars get allocated. The County Board of Supervisors did approve $250,000 last week at their meeting to help seed fund the effort. The effort is really being led by the Yolo Community Fund. And at this point, we believe there'll be a partnership with Dignity and Sutter, as well as Kaiser, as well as the tribe. Those commitments are still in process. And I think the purpose for bringing it up to the city managers was to seek potential support from each of our cities to match or substantially contribute to the fund consistent with the County Board of Supervisors. At this point, we don't feel there's quite enough information yet to be able to make that recommendation to our respective councils. However, we believe, given the number of different requests that are coming into each of our cities for this purpose, there's extreme value in potentially directing those requests to a single point. I think the cities of Davis and West Sacramento, and I even represented, and I believe our council would be potentially supportive, but taking a much more incremental approach, starting with let's add a city council representative to the advisory group that's helping define the criteria and understand the community both needs as well as resources that already exist. to build a better set of understanding, and then ultimately to develop the list of criteria that will be used to distribute the funds into our respective cities. So with that, I anticipate likely as early as next meeting to have a full report and a recommendation before the council on this topic, but happy to get into any more questions or details on that today that will help inform how we move forward with that. So I will conclude my update, and then Emily, if you're available still, if you wouldn't mind walking us through some of the highlights of the Emergency Operations Center and where we stand today and where we see our community responding as we look to the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yes, thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members and members of the public who are also listening in. So my day job is a fire marshal, and when we are in a case of an emergency, I transition over to an Emergency Operations Center coordinator. So tonight I'll be taking a few minutes to kind of go over where we are at as a city and what we're looking towards for our community. So our Woodland EOC, which is Emergency Operations Center, has been activated for two weeks now at a virtual level. We currently have 24 Woodland staff assigned to roles within this EOC structure so that we can carefully address all aspects of this pandemic as it relates to our community. The EOC structure is designed, even though we are in kind of an unprecedented time, the EOC structure is designed to be fluid and be tailored to any emergency, which is why this is the best structure for our city. Part of our response is to ensure that we continue to implement our continuity of operation plans that we have in place for our city and within each department so that we can make sure that we are providing services to the community, and we continue to monitor the situation, tailor our approach, and design contingency plans for city operations. Within the city operations, we are working very closely with our county partners to make sure that we are providing a consistent message both internally to our staff and externally to our community. Our staff that is continuing to work and not teleworking is practicing safe social distancing practices. We are continuing to conduct our inspections in a safe manner, many of which are now actually being conducted via video call to further limit our contact with the public. As far as our public safety staff, we have plenty of supplies and PPE right now to keep us safe, so that's both fire and police. We have also modified our responses to limit that exposure, though, as possible, regardless of the call, maintaining distance if possible and donning PPE as we need to protect ourselves. So transitioning kind of where we are in this kind of state of emergency here, most recent data for the county of Yolo is that we have 25 positive cases with 1 death associated with COVID-19. As the city manager discussed a little bit, the county is working on creating a dashboard to where this will all kind of be in one spot for the public to view. It'll be available on the county website soon. This is something that they are working on. So we're watching the numbers and we're watching the world as we all are right now, and there's no crystal ball to tell us when these cases will start to slow down. And although there has been maybe some academic modeling to indicate we're looking to middle to late April that we will hopefully see a slowdown, the EOC and everyone within the city of Woodland is operating under continued planning ahead. And I think it's important to note that in this type of unprecedented emergency that we are committed to continue to look ahead and establish contingency plans for the future. The city of Woodland is pretty fortunate, very fortunate actually, to have such a close connection and communication with our county partners and our surrounding cities that we are designed not only to respond to the current situation, but to forecast ahead of what might be before us. And that is a large part of what we're doing with the EOC, to really watch what's going on around us and plan for what may be there or may be coming. We are in constant, regular communication with our healthcare facilities, and today they report that they are seeing a lower volume of non-COVID patients in general, and they are seeing an increase of people who are concerned that they may be exhibiting symptoms, so they're testing more people. But they have assured us that they have plenty of room in their wards that they have designated for COVID patients if we were to see a surge like some of our surrounding states and other parts of the world are seeing. They are prepared, they are looking ahead, and they are planning for if we were to see a surge. They have plenty of ventilators and plenty of room. We currently have no positive cases in our skilled nursing facilities, and there have been no outbreaks in our skilled nursing facilities, which is really good news. Kind of moving on to other parts of this emergency, our county health officer has indicated that our current stay-at-home order is due to expire April 11th, but that is currently being evaluated this week in light of some of the recommendations that have come from the president. More information will be coming down later this week from the county with regards to that. As Dana from the county referenced last week, that although this emergency is still ongoing, part of EOC planning and preparation is to start looking ahead towards recovery really early on in the emergency. And a part of this is financial assistance. So our finance department and our finance section of the EOC is already working with FEMA to apply for our request for assistance, which is the first step in financial reimbursement for the city. We are also working very closely with our county to house those homeless identified in the community as needing hotels during this time. Specifically within Woodland, we have 110 who have been identified who need to be housed, and we have currently housed about a quarter of them within 4 different hotels throughout the city. Recently, in the last couple of days, we have been working, it was requested by our police department to gather the data of these homeless individuals that we are housing so that we can effectively put it on a GIS map for our own internal use so that we know where they're located, what services they are being provided, or what services they may need. And this will help with our own response to make this a successful transition into these hotels during this time. Our city manager also mentioned our economic development staff has been working very diligently with our businesses in the city. So I just wanted to specifically highlight that we have a really cool map on our city website under the COVID-19 part that is a real-time map that identifies all restaurants within our city that are offering curbside pickup with the phone number. So I just used it the other day. You call the number right on the map and you know exactly where you're going. So this is a cool feature that we have that we've been sharing on our social media channels as well. And then finally, I'd kind of like to close my report by referencing that, in this time of struggle and an unprecedented time, you're always going to find people who rise to the occasion, and we're always going to find helpers. And I specifically wanted to highlight the First in Relief for Evacuees Foundation, or referred to as the Fire Foundation. Both the City of Woodland and the county have partnered with them to manage the donations of essential medical supplies that have started to come in. But this one's particularly special to Woodland because this organization was started by our very own Lacey and Josh Hilliard, who are both heavily involved in the city otherwise. And this is just another way that their good work is being exemplified in our community during this time. And they have been very successful in bringing in the donations and getting them to the right spots. And that concludes my my report. If there's any questions.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Mr. Mayor, we'll turn it back to the council. I will note that we do have 2 emails that have been received. So should the council wish those be read right now, I believe the city clerk is prepared to read those into the record.
Why don't we go ahead and do that first, and then we'll invite council to comment.
Okay. These both are from Sarah Monley. So the first one is, in regards to Councilmember Rodriguez's comment, as a public health professional, I would like the minutes to state that healthy, regular members of the public should not be keeping and wearing personal protective masks when they must go out in public. Healthcare workers need masks right now. If you are sick, stay in your home. If you are healthy, wear gloves, wash your hands, and wipe down surfaces. But please do not keep and hoard masks. Thank you, Sarah. And the second comment is, Dear Council, if needed, might it be possible to convert the Woodland Mall across the street from the county fairgrounds to an overflow hospital/healthcare space? Thank you, Sarah. And that concludes the comment.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Now, at this time, does any council member have a question for the city manager and for that matter, for Emily? By the way, Emily, that was an outstanding presentation. Thank you. Let me start with Mayor Pro Tem Steller. Do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you to both the manager and the fire marshal for those great presentations. A lot of people are doing a lot of things, and it's very, very encouraging. What I would like to request, is it possible to put a link for the CARES program on the front page of our city website so that our local businesses can start applying for the federal money available under that program? And the city manager mentioned to me today that a local business person was able to apply for $10,000, and it only took 10 minutes. It's important to our community that we get these grants into our community. Now, they're actually loans, but apparently if you maintain your workforce and pay them at least 75% of their regular compensation, these can be turned into grants. So I think that kind of information, economic information, is really important. If Nick Ramsey is listening into our council meeting tonight, president of Woodland Chamber, that might be something they'd care to take on as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Barajas, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, along those lines, for small business owners who are looking for some relief, if we can put not just the link, but the phone number, because they're going to have 6 staff on the line to provide assistance to small business owners and others that are seeking relief. And that's going to start tomorrow from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's going to be 530-661-2641. So maybe we can have that number up there on the website as well. My question is regards to the number of ICU beds that are at Dignity Health. There's been some questions on social media regarding do we have enough beds in case there's a lot of cases a spike in cases that we might see. And from what I've heard is from the county is that we have enough beds for a medium surge at this point in time. And I just want to see if Emily has more information on that.
Thank you, Council Member. From my information, and that was part of the conversation I was having earlier today, is the size of surge. From my information, they have looked into the data and to the types of or the surge numbers that they're seeing around, and they have room and they're prepared for a surge. I can get back with you for more information on what numbers they're looking at, but they have said that they have room now and they have room to expand if necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Barajas. Councilman Fernandez, question or comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Landsberg. A couple questions for our city manager. First one relates to just outreach to the public in general on how they can obtain more information related to the coronavirus. Have we done any sort of outreach via, our billing system at all? Like, I mean, I know in the past we've sent out additional flyers with, like a water bill or a sewer bill. I acknowledge that a lot of this stuff has gone online, but, it seems to be a lot of, misinformation out there still, a lot of uncertainty as to like how people can best support their community and those vulnerable in their community. So, beyond, just reaching out via, a bill, what other measures have we taken and can we take to just make sure we reach out to everyone? Because social media is more pervasive than, city government sometimes. And I think it would be nice to at least get an update on get access to accurate information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so great question. We actually have an entire team dedicated to sort of communication, both sort of incoming communication, and then how do we sort of digest that and externally communicate in the context of our own community here. We have, continued to release information via press release that we also turn into social media content on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of every week, updating the topics that are covered in those informational releases to address everything from business assistance relief to how to protect yourself to, what does shelter in place mean and how can you do that, effectively. And so I think social media obviously is the most impactful in terms of reaching the balance of our community. We are constantly exploring new and creative ways to sort of engage the community around the topic and make sure that they're getting information that's both accurate but also interesting and relevant to them. The concept of, using our utility bills as a mechanism to reach, we have not actually discussed. It's certainly one I will talk with our finance officer about doing that. We may have missed the window for April, but possibly looking forward to May, we can certainly do that. So we are always open to new ideas, new suggestions on how to reach the community. So don't hesitate if you're seeing or hearing things that don't sound right to share those with us and we can help correct the message. Or if you're seeing creative ways in other communities or even here in Woodland that might be effective, please let us know.
Thanks, Ken. Follow-up question that's unrelated, but relates to these funding sources that are now available for a lot of small businesses. Do we have the capacity within our city staff to go beyond, just posting some sort of, link on our website? Like, do we have the capacity to, almost like provide some sort of helpline to, guide businesses through this difficult process? Because I imagine, for some businesses, the world's kind of caving in on them. So do we have that? I mean, is that something that's been discussed? It's just something I've been thinking about because it's difficult to navigate through, a lot of these programs, especially when everything's happening so quickly.
Right. Yeah, so I think we're triaging it in a way. So our staff, sort of led by Erica Bumgarner, is, understanding and learning all these programs that are out there at a fairly high level, identifying how we need to push out that resource to our constituents. And then when we're talking with our own businesses, we're, aware of what's available. We're not going to be, the deep knowledge resource, though, but we have developed connections through both Yolo County, Yolo Works program for unemployment assistance, but also guidance on federal and state programs that are out there. But then, as you recall from last week's council meeting, we are partnering with the Metro Chamber in Sacramento that is in the process of standing up basically a hotline and a resource for businesses throughout the entire region. And they're building out their call center to have people available 7 days a week, I believe at least 8 to 5 p.m. every day in multiple languages. So we will be pointing, are businesses that are seeking better comprehension and how to apply for SBA loans, how to access the CARES Act funding that's available, and talk them through, what might be the best fit for their unique situation. So we're, trying to be smart about not being experts in everything, identifying those that are already available to provide that resource, and then connecting them into that. But making sure that we also have a feedback loop. So if we point to businesses in those directions, if they're not fruitful, we ask them to let us know so that we can adapt, our guidance accordingly. So that's sort of the strategy that we're deploying as of today, and it will continue to evolve as more and more resources are out there and more businesses are frightened to figure out, how they're going to make it tomorrow, let alone next week or next month.
All right. Thanks for the update, Ken. Appreciate it. And I appreciate all the work you and your staff are doing.
Sure. Our pleasure.
Anything else, Councilmember Fernandez?
That's it for me.
Thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez, any questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do want for us, would like to encourage staff and council to also make sure that we're tapping into the resource for older community members. The governor did launch a neighbor-to-neighbor campaign to check on, specifically geared towards checking on our older adult neighbors. So if we can provide a link on the website for older adults that are looking for information on our webpage, that would be great. I know there's a 211 a system in place that older community members can dial into for information. But it would be good for us to promote this effort on our webpage, and also on Facebook. I know that the Spring Lake community has promoted a little bit of the same campaign on their own prior to the announcement of the governor's campaign. So I want to thank folks that are out there on Nextdoor promoting a check on your neighbors. So yeah, if we could add just a button out there on our page, on our COVID-19 page on the website, that would be fantastic. And finally, yes, I to the comment of one of our constituents who raises a good point, and I want to thank them. I think it was Sarah, if I'm not mistaken, about a good point about not hoarding resources. Definitely when you're out in the stores, and this comes into play when looking out for our older neighbors, checking in on our neighbors and ensuring that if there's something out there that they need, that we can help them out or at least connect them to a resource. That would be great. But no, I can see the concern with masks. I have my one mask that I got from day one since the start of the pandemic, and I've held on to it. And we need to be considerate of other folks. But other than that, mainly putting out that resource for older for our seniors out on our webpage, that would be great. Thank you.
Well,
Mayor Landsberg, this is Councilmember Barajas. Can I get the floor? Hello?
Mayor Landsberg, we're trying to unmute you.
yes,
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay.
Am I back on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ken, I have a question, and it's probably going to be related to Craig Locke. And I know this seems kind of silly, but people hoarding toilet paper and wipes has, I think, going to create a problem for our city staff when it comes to waste. There was some publicity just today in the media about getting people to stop using wipes and putting them into our sewer system. My suggestion is to have Craig put something together in the form of a press release to get people to stop flushing those wipes and putting them into appropriate waste containers before it causes our waste utilities a problem. That's all I really have for that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll follow up on that. Mr. Mayor, I believe Councilmember Barajas was seeking the floor for another remark.
Go ahead, Councilman Barajas.
Thank you, Mayor Landsberg. I was wondering if we can use or increase our utility assistance program to those that have been impacted by COVID-19. And then is there a possibility that the CDBG funds can be used, or some of it can be used for food vouchers for farm workers or N95 masks for them?
So, yeah, we, at this point, our utility ratepayer assistance program has been fully allocated for the year. So if it was the council's desire, we would need to come back with a budget adjustment to provide additional funding into that program and build criteria around it to support those. With respect to CDBG funding, I can certainly follow up with Dan Sokolow, who's most knowledgeable in our CDBG program. I do believe that there's been some additional funding, both at the federal level and state level, that will be flowing through, at least it appears at this point, only to the larger cities and counties of 500,000 or more, of which, unfortunately, we do not qualify. There is hope at some point that the state will recognize that the smaller jurisdictions have as much need often to respond. And so I believe some of those dollars are CDBG funding related, and we'll have a lot less restrictions around how they're used. But for the more immediate need, we can certainly check with our existing CDBG funding program and bring back any ideas on how that can get into the hands of some of our local food and ag employees.
That would be great. That would be awesome.
Okay.
This is Mayor Landsberg. Any other comments from council members or perhaps any member of the public have weighed in? Hearing none, we're going to close this item. We're going to move to item F3, which is the moratorium on commercial property auctions.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'll do a quick intro to this and then ask our city attorney, Kara Ueda, to walk you through the particulars of the ordinance before you this evening. As you recall, the council had previously adopted a similar moratorium on evictions of residential tenants. And we indicated to the council, and the council requested that we come back with an equivalent ordinance to protect commercial tenants that were fearful of not being able to pay rent during this time of economic crisis, and therefore be potentially subject to eviction. Many cities throughout the state are enacting these ordinances. To date, the state has given the ability for local jurisdictions to adopt these. However, unlike the statewide residential eviction moratorium that the governor declared last week, they have yet to establish a comprehensive ordinance for commercial tenants. So local jurisdictions are still left with the ability to enact these provisions. So what we have done is put together an ordinance for the council's consideration this evening. We have received just one communication from a local landlord with some concerns and some valuable sort of perspective on the consequences, should certain tenants choose to take advantage of protections under ordinances like these, and the implications it has for some of our local landlords were they not to be able to receive rents, because many of the federal programs that are out there to date have provided relief for the businesses themselves, and even include ability for those relief funds to help pay for rent. However, there is not to date an equivalent relief package that supports commercial landlords anyways. So just expressed some concerns about creating a situation where commercial landlords were potentially going to be in potential default. So no amendments were made in the ordinances for you this evening. And Kara can expand a little bit, but our recommendation is to potentially come back once we understand better what the federal programs truly provide to local businesses and whether that assistance will be coming and when it will be coming, and not try to sort of interpret and guess to date, since those programs are still fairly new. So with that, I will have Kara briefly walk you through the parameters of the ordinance, and then we'll turn it back to the council for questions and comments.
Great. Thank you, Ken. This is Kara Ueda, the city attorney. As the council will remember, a couple of weeks ago on March 17th, the council adopted an urgency ordinance to prohibit landlords from evicting residential tenants due to their failure to pay rent for reasons related to COVID-19. That ordinance has been in effect now for a couple of weeks, but as Ken noted, the governor did issue an executive order last Friday, which imposes a statewide moratorium on evictions, but that executive order, best of our reading of it, only covers residential evictions and not commercial evictions. And so as we approach the eve of the beginning of the next month, we're bringing this ordinance to you for your consideration. It is also an urgency ordinance, which means not only that should the council adopt it, it would go into effect immediately, but it also would require a 4/5 vote in order for it to be enacted. This item, I think, does build upon some of the concerns that some of the council members have already expressed about businesses continuing to operate and the financial impacts that they have already begun experiencing and may experience in the future, especially to those businesses that are not deemed to be essential and that as a result of the shelter-in-place orders have either been, in the case of restaurants, limited to providing takeout and delivery orders, or in many instances, forcing to be closed in their entirety. The ordinance before you is very similar to the residential eviction moratorium that the council adopted, in that it similarly prevents commercial landlords from beginning eviction procedures for their commercial tenants who have been experiencing financial difficulties related to COVID-19. Specifically, those financial impacts would basically be the commercial tenant has lost business income as a result of themselves being ill with the virus or caring for a household or family member who is sick with COVID-19, or if they've experienced financial impacts directly because of their compliance with recommendations from a governmental health authority to comply with the shelter-in-place orders, or if they have any extraordinary out-of-pocket medical expenses or otherwise have had to reduce their business activities due to childcare needs arising from school closures. Similar to the residential eviction ordinance, the tenants would continue to be responsible for paying the rent. However, the evictions would not be possible for the duration of this ordinance, which as it's written right now is for 60 days. That would cover basically the next 2 months. But the tenant would be responsible for repaying the rent owed over a period of 6 months following the expiration of this ordinance. As Ken mentioned, the city did receive an email, which I believe the council has all received, from a property owner expressing some additional ways in which a tenant may be able to, or must be able to rather, provide some documentation of steps that they have taken to mitigate the financial impact to their businesses. We did start taking a look at some of those federal laws that have just been enacted. In particular, the CARES Act is very complicated and complex, and it applies to different businesses in different manners. And so if the council is interested in potentially adding some additional language to this ordinance concerning requiring additional measures be taken by those commercial tenants before these eviction moratorium procedures would apply, what we'd recommend is just adopting this ordinance tonight as an urgency ordinance, giving staff direction to do some more research as to how to really draft language that captures what the council wants, as well as really gets at some of the nuances that we need to figure out in all the different laws that are just coming out and that still may come out. And then we would come back to council likely in a couple weeks to put that information forward. That would still provide enough time, before the next month's rent payment would be due in May, for that commercial tenant to provide information to the landlord. And that's about it. As I mentioned, if adopted, this ordinance would go into effect immediately, would be effective for rent payments due tomorrow, but would require a 4/5 vote of the council. That's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
This is Mayor Lansford. Does any member of the council have a question for the city attorney or for the city manager on this item? Hearing none, I do have a comment if you're ready for it, Mr. City Manager.
I'm ready.
Having reviewed the proposed ordinance, I'm in agreement with most of it. There's no question that this pandemic has blindsided so many of us. There's no question that this pandemic has affected business in Woodland, whether it's large, medium, or small. I truly understand the need to protect those who have truly in need and truly been impacted by this virus. As a government, we need to respond. We need to enact measures to minimize the overall effect on all of us and not just a few. You have mentioned that the federal government has passed a $2 trillion CARES Act, and there are many provisions in that CARES Act that may be helpful to many of our local businesses. For that reason, I believe the most prudent approach to this ordinance is to treat commercial tenants a bit differently than we treat residential tenants. We have already adopted emergency ordinance for our residential tenants. And for that, I am grateful, and I believe the tenants are as well. This ordinance that we're looking at today treats all commercial tenants the same. I do not believe that all commercial tenants are the same. There are many commercial tenants who are part of a subsidiary or part of a major corporation. They have tenants who operate at profitable locations who have been very profitable, particularly over the last few years. But my concern is for mom and pop tenants who struggle to make rent, struggle to make payroll, and survive month to month. I have heard from commercial landlords in the last couple of weeks. It does appear that major corporations in our region are attempting to take advantage of this situation, to take advantage of local ordinances, creating temporary relief. Some landlords will begin to see massive abuse from some of these commercial tenants because of their connection to major corporations. Our ordinance fails to consider the number of programs that have been established by federal and state agencies, nor has there been any requirement in our ordinance to prove a true need based on multiple years, if not decades, of profitability. Our ordinance does not give direction to commercial tenants to take advantage of the various programs offered by both the state and federal government. I'm going to agree to adopt this tonight with the direction to staff, that we do insert information about CARES. We do insert information that businesses of all sizes, of all predicaments, use their best efforts to work with their landlords as well. Our ordinance should be designed to deal with our smaller businesses. Even in a good economy, most small businesses, even those that are moderately profitable, will not be able to generate enough profits to pay past due rents once they reopen. For that reason, I think we need to look at this a little closer and amend this in a couple of weeks. And that's my comment.
Mayor Landsberg?
Yes.
I don't think I could have said it any better. I agree fundamentally with everything you've said. I'm always a little reluctant to see government insert itself in private sector transactions between parties. But there are situations where perhaps it is the appropriate thing. And I think the way the proposed ordinance is written, there's reasonable cause for having something in place. But it is unfortunate that sometimes the biggest companies will be the ones to jump on this first, and they will withhold their rental payments and use it as their cash flow at the expense of the landlord. So I was pleased to see a number of qualifiers in here that there have to be established situations that are justifying the assertion of this avoidance of eviction and for non-payment of rent. So anyway, I think it's worth looking at again and revisiting. But meanwhile, tonight, I will support the ordinance in order to protect our smaller businesses.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stallard. Any other member of the council have a comment or question? Madam Clerk, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Has any member of the public provided you any questions for the record?
No.
Thank you. In that case, do we have a motion by any member of the council regarding this emergency ordinance?
Move to approve. Angel Barajas.
Is there a second?
Second, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you. The motion is made by Councilmember Barajas and seconded by Councilmember Rodriguez. At this time, Madam Clerk, a roll call vote, please.
Okay, I'll begin the roll call vote in alphabetical order. Councilmember Barajas,
Yes.
Councilmember Fernandez,
Yes.
Mayor Landsberg,
Yes, with the caveat that we will look at this again in a couple of weeks.
okay. Councilmember Rodriguez,
Rodriguez, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stallard.
Stallard, yes.
Thank you. And that was carried unanimously on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We're now going to move to F4, extended shelter operation. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is the final item on the agenda. The City of Woodland entered into a MOU with the county and Fourth and Hope back in December of 2018 to provide extended shelter capacity for homeless that were being displaced by the county's parking lot and enforcement of camping occurring on such. MOU has been in place since then. There have been multiple extensions for time, largely to allow both the city and the county and our nonprofit partners to advance plans for a permanent shelter at a new location outside of the downtown. And as you are well aware, the Beamer 102 project is a priority and continues to advance. And will ultimately take the place of this emergency shelter as well as Fourth and Hope and provide additional capacity even beyond that to house our local homeless population. As the shelter project is not yet operational, the current MOU expires today, and we're seeking council approval to extend that MOU up until October of this year, at which point it is our current anticipation that the new shelter at Beamer 102 will be completed and hopefully operational and able to transition the residents in this extended shelter to that new location. The fiscal impact of extending this would be for the full additional term, $42,000 for the city's cost. We do equally split the cost of providing the shelter services with the county. So 50% of the costs are shared equally with the county, and those funds are then used to pay Fourth and Hope to provide the services and the staffing needed to support the population. 30 individuals can currently be accommodated at the extended shelter. We average roughly 22 to 24 persons per night based on records through January 2020 of this year. So there is a demonstrated continued need for those individuals. Plus, it gives us the added capacity to allow us to enforce some of the camping ordinances that we have on the books, which is critical to help manage the population and the impacts associated with that. So it's staff's recommendation that the council approve the extension of the MOU this evening. We have sufficient funds in the current budget to cover the city's costs through June of this year. And should the council approve the MOU extension as part of the new budget for 2021, we will be building in the balance of the additional funding necessary to get us through October. So that concludes the presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Angel Barajas, question.
Go ahead, Council Member.
Okay. Why is the timeline being extended? Why couldn't we meet our original goal of moving the shelter over towards 102 and Beamer?
Money. A variety of factors have caused the project to not advance as quickly as had hoped. Primary one is the fact that the project's in a floodplain. When we ran the flood modeling based on the proposed project layout, it dictated that the orientation of the site be modified to allow the floodwaters to flow without impacting adjoining properties. That had a ripple effect on the environmental analysis that we had already commenced. So we had to go back and modify some of the environmental assessment on the project, and then also doing a lot of heavy lifting with our partner agencies and nonprofits to understand ultimately how not just the shelter itself, but the ultimate campus out there, which would include the 61 No Place Like Home housing units, as well as relocation of Walter's House from downtown, how that entire campus ultimately would be achieved. So we are in the middle of a process of developing a 4-party MOU between the city, the county, Friends of the Mission, and Fourth and Hope that will articulate all of the expectations of what we're collectively trying to achieve out there and what our respective responsibilities, both to get the project constructed and ultimately even to support the staffing resources necessary to make the programs and the housing project sustainable out there. We are still in need of funding to complete the entire 61-unit housing project. So we're actively advancing efforts to fill the remaining gap there. We did report that Dignity Health stepped up and has committed additional $1.5 million towards the project. We are also now focused trying to get the balance of the Sutter philanthropy funding of $1.5 million fully leveraged. So that ties back to the Ashley and Maine apartment project that we're trying to complete. So there's just a lot of moving parts to the project, and making sure that we do so in a manner that ensures that if we build the shelter, ultimately the entire project is going to materialize, and we haven't built a shelter out there without the additional resources and capacity to make it successful. So I think in the long-range calendar, I do show on the April 21st agenda the goal of bringing that master MOU with our homeless partners together for the project for the council to memorialize. So we'll provide a much more comprehensive update on the project at that time.
Okay. Although I'm disappointed in extending the timeline, I see the justification for it. And I'm just hoping that we prioritize this as a city, as a council, to get the move going, but before the end of the year and hopefully before October. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Barajas. Any other member of the council have a comment or question? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, have we received any public comments on this item?
No. No comment.
Hearing no comments and no further questions from council, is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, Stallard
Yes.
here. I'm pleased to move the recommended action.
I'll second.
Thank you. The motion is by Council or Mayor Pro Tem Stallard and seconded by Councilmember Barajas. Madam Clerk, would you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Councilmember Barajas?
Yes.
Councilmember Fernandez?
Aye.
Mayor Landsberg?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stallard?
Stallard, yes.
The item carries on a 5-0 vote.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us to the end of our scheduled agenda. And before we adjourn, I would like to have the record reflect that this special meeting of the City Council is in memory of a very special lady who passed away this week. Gloria Barton, wife of Assistant Police Chief Glenn Barton, at 89 years old. Gloria lived her entire 89 years in the city of Woodland. Woodland was her only home. And now I wish to formally launch the city of Woodland's participation in a nationwide movement to keep our community connected. This movement in the United States began in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and has now been adopted by many cities in the United States. It is only fitting that America's City of Trees join in the effort. As we continue to stay at home and practice social distancing, for many, it can start to feel a bit lonely. It is important to remember that our city, our county, our entire state, and yes, the world is in this fight together. So we in Woodland have decided to join this nationwide movement and encourage the community to go outside and say hi from a safe distance. That safe distance is at least 6 feet away. The city and the city council urges the entire community to go outside on your front porches, on your balconies, your sidewalks, or even through a window in front of your home at 7 p.m. every night and simply wave to your neighbors. This just takes a minute. I'm certain it won't interfere too much with your Jeopardy time. Just take a minute at 7 p.m. every night, step outside and wave to your neighbors. This is the time to look out for each other and check on your neighbors, even from a safe distance. We're all connected and we will all make it through this pandemic. Let's keep Woodland strong. We also encourage you to utilize our new hashtag, which is hashtag Say Hi Woodland. I want to thank the staff for developing the hashtag, the slogan, as well as a logo, which I hope to get publicized real soon. Let's start this tomorrow night, since it's too late for tonight. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Share this information with your neighbors, your social media contacts, work contacts, your family. Let's start saying hi to everyone tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Have a pleasant evening.
Are we adjourned?
We're adjourned at
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
7:27.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.